Hello. Hi, this is Jeffrey Warnick, and sorry for the technical delay. Mostly my fault. This is the first time I'm responsible for actually going live on this. So, Adam, thank you for your patience.
My pleasure.
And I'm happy to have as my guest Adam Swart. Um, Adam is founder of a company called Crowds on Demand. Uh, I actually never really had much knowledge about the business of people paying to bring crowds. I'm here in Mexico City. So in Mexico, it's a customary practice that's what the political parties do. In almost every political rally, people are bussed in, and usually they have very little, but except they're not paid. I think they have very little choice. I think if they don't go, they don't get paid. So I don't know exactly how it works, but I don't think they have much choice involved in this. So, Adam, how long ago and what provoked you to start this business? This is very interesting to me.
Jeffrey, first of all, let me say thanks so much for having me on your program. I've been in business for 13 years. Started it in 2012. So we've been doing this throughout several administrations, and we're generally kind of an oppositional force. Of course, it's very important to say for your listeners that the only form of protest that we do are legal protests and peaceful protests, right? So, like when you see something that's a riot, blocking streets without a permit, any of those sort of things, that's not us, right? Now, of course, internationally, this has been done informally, domestically, this has been done informally. We are the largest protest company, though, in the world, to the best of my knowledge. And we have developed this great reputation because we only source people who are actually passionate about an issue to turn out around a particular cause. So if it's an environmental cause, we source environmentalists. If it's a conservative cause, we source conservatives. So the idea is you're being paid for your time, not for your opinions.
Hmm. So most of the people who you recruit are not just bodies showing up there. They're people who believe in the cause, but the only thing that would get them out of their seat to the event is if somebody paid them for it. But they're actually or generally authentic about when they go to a protest that they're supporting that specific protest, that specific
Well,
legal peaceful protest.
I'll put it to you this way, Jeffrey. The thing is, it's so expensive right now in this country, right? With inflation and everything, low unemployment. Think about what it takes for a normal person, not a wealthy person, to come out to a protest, especially during the week, right? You have to take off work. You have to arrange childcare for your children, right? You might be extremely passionate about an issue, but you may just simply be available to be able to do that, right? Not everyone is wealthy. Not everyone has, the ability to just take off work unpaid or has a job that lets them go out to a protest whenever they like. So it actually facilitates a lot of activism. And it's interesting because I get a lot of shit from conservatives about this, but actually we do a lot of work for conservatives because in a lot of cases, conservatives have more difficulty turning people out because conservatives are more likely to have familial responsibilities and more traditional jobs. Not to say conservatives work and liberals don't, but a lot of people on the left are more likely to have kind of tech jobs or flexible work situations, while people on the right are more likely to be kind of 9 to 5 type folks for whom they can't easily get out unless they're being paid.
So, what made you start this business? What were you doing before you did this, and what made you? Was there any one specific thing that said, I got to do this, or is this something you were thinking about? So, how did you get into this business?
Well, Jeffrey, I'm 34 right now. So I started the company when I was 21. So I don't want to try to present it as I had a long work history before that. However, what I will say is I worked on a lot of political campaigns previously, mostly on the liberal democratic side. I definitely consider myself an independent now, but at the time, I was definitely on the democratic side. And the guys running those campaigns were these figures out of the 60s, the hippie era, where you could turn out 20,000 students, no problem. So they would say, Adam, bring us 10,000 students tomorrow for this event. And I'd be like, guys, this is really challenging. I don't necessarily know whether we're going to be able to deliver. But what I actually found, Jeffrey, is that even more effectively than the rally side of things was the protest side of things. So you could have your opponent having a rally with, say, 500 people, 1,000 people. You could turn out 10 protesters, 20 protesters, and you get equal media time because the media shows up and they cover it as candidate X hosted a rally, and then these protesters are upset at candidate X. So you actually are able to get more bang for the buck that way. So I saw that we were delivering millions in earned media, and for your listeners, earned media is sort of what it would take to buy that amount of media coverage if you were to purchase ads. So it was incredibly beneficial for the campaign, but as a campaign staffer, I got paid very, very little. And I was thinking, hey, there's a real business to be made around this issue.
That one time I went to a political breakfast in Manhattan. So I'm waiting online to get in, and I see a car pull up, and the car pull up was like a little SUV, and out came a journalist. I forget which publication, and four people. I think it was about four people that were dressed identical, and they were the protesters.
There you go.
And this was a major publication. And they came out with so they all were talking, so I walked over to the journalist to start asking questions. The journalist was not open to answering any of the questions because I said, this looks like it's all manufactured. So you brought your own protesters.
Everything is manufactured.
You all look like you know each other.
Here's the thing, everything.
No, I noticed in the camera angle, you're only showing a small camera angle, so you're not showing that only four people showed up.
True.
You're trying to show that these are the only four people you're speaking to, as opposed to these are the only four people here, and there are four people that came together. So I'm asking you, are you going to tell in your reportage, are you going to tell that you brought these four people with you and that they're the only four people here protesting? And the journalist just tried to ignore me. Actually, I kept at it until the police came and asked me to move away from the journalist. I never touched the journalist or anything. I just kept asking questions. We were on a street, so it's public property. I didn't get within like 2-3 feet of the person. I didn't want to be so close so the journalist could accuse me being in their face. I wanted to be close enough so they could hear me and not any closer than that. And I was not yelling. I just was asking questions in a voice loud enough so that the journalist could hear me. And but the journalist did go to the police, and the police did come to me and ask me, and I said, what am I doing wrong here? But I moved anyway.
Yeah, it's true. Well, first of all, that's disappointing because journalists should support the First Amendment and the right to free expression if it's done in a peaceful way. So it's very disappointing that would happen. But the reality, Jeffrey, is that every protest is manufactured. I mean, if you look at every movement from civil rights, gay rights, Tea Party, MAGA, there's millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars behind these movements. And it is manufactured. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean there aren't people who are very passionate about the movement. But as a catalyst, I mean, if you think about it, in order to start a tech company, right, you need initial capital to grow the users. The company's not going to be profitable day one. Same thing with a movement goes the same way. A movement is not going to be popular day one. The Tea Party started, the inception was from funding from the Koch brothers. That's my understanding, right? They funded it. A lot of these initial rallies had 30 people, 50 people in those, silly Revolutionary War attire. Fox News, conservative media amplified that big time, and it grew, right? It wouldn't have grown if people weren't upset. So what all the funding did was catalyze it. If it's not a good movement, it won't work, right? You can throw hundreds of millions behind Jeb Bush, but how did that go, right? I mean, so I guess my point is that what it everything is manufactured. And I'm trying to go on podcasts like yours to kind of really make the case that yes, everything's manufactured, but it's not a bad thing, because it's just like putting money behind like a tech company. It's you're catalyzing it, but if no one likes the product, it's going to die anyway.
And that's a good point. And of the events, when you sign contracts with people, do they generally say you need to have this minimum amount of people, or is it a best efforts basis? What's like the structure of these agreements, or
I don't
there
like
is no
best
standard
efforts.
structure? Excuse me?
I don't like best efforts. I like guarantee. So we guarantee the people. And to do that, we typically overbook our events. So if we say 50, we'll probably book 60. So we because typically our contracts allow for a prorated refund in the event that we don't provide the people. So it's not to my benefit to not provide the people.
And the typical rally, if there is such a thing, so pardon my ignorance, so I might be asking bad questions because I'm completely unfamiliar with this.
You seem like a very smart guy. I'm sure no bad questions.
So thank you. So at these rallies, what percentage of what's the typical rally size? And maybe there is no typical rally size. And what percentage of the people at the rally size are ones that you have brought there? And generally, do you have exclusivity, or will they hire multiple people comparable, maybe not the same size as you, maybe not the same experience as you, maybe
Sure.
not going to deliver simply, but because they want to get as many bodies there, they might use multiple sources to get bodies to the rally. So I have several questions there. So
Well, let me unpack them. Basically, Crowds on Demand, we do everything from rallies with tens of thousands of people to pickets where it's like you mentioned, 4 people. Sometimes it's 1 person, sometimes it's 2 people, sometimes it's 10,000. But if you're asking our typical, it's probably about 50 to 100. Because what I like to say is that's a threshold to get media attention, to get critical coverage, to have enough people to make an impact, but not so many where it would be extremely expensive or would require permitting and all other kinds of coordination necessary. So 50 to 100 is probably our typical. I would say it's very hard to do an effective protest to get media coverage under 25 people unless the media really owes you, because 10 people protesting is just not very sexy. So in regards to exclusivity, now we don't operate technically like a law firm. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't technically have conflict of interest requirements, but I enforce them upon myself. And sometimes that's actually been very bad for business, because if I take one customer on one side of an issue, I obviously couldn't take another customer on that opposite side of the issue. That's not to say we might work with a union on one particular cause and a management of a separate company on their cause, but we would never work labor and management on the same cause. So, and by the way, I don't think that's hypocritical, because sometimes labor is right and sometimes management is right. Labor is right when it comes to bathroom breaks. I drink a lot of water, so I value my bathroom breaks. So I don't like when management says you can't use the bathroom. But sometimes management is right when labor is asking for ridiculous concessions that would essentially make the business unprofitable and would end up leading to them getting fired anyway. So, I'm happy to work with labor and management, or different sides of different issues, NIMBYs, YIMBYs, and in between when they have a good point.
Now, I think this year there's been people feel a lot. There've been a lot of protests, and people feel a lot to protest. So,
Yes.
what can you tell? I don't want you to disclose anything that's inappropriate for you to disclose, but like, what are the type of groups that have approached you this year about doing protests, and what's your
Everybody.
criteria for determining, who to accept as a client and who to reject as a client?
It's a good question. I mean, the reality is almost any hot button issue, we probably get approached by everybody on it, whether it's Israel, Palestine, Tesla, any big movement, we get approached by people. Of course, the criteria is number one. I mean, there's a budget issue, right? Where their budget has to not only match our pricing, but also their expectations, right? So if they have the budget for a 1-day event, but their expectation is to get a bill passed through Congress, I would say, well, your budget doesn't match your expectations. So I would tell them, you're better off trying to raise more money before trying to start something, because ultimately we'll do the rally and it probably won't achieve your goal. So I'm very goal driven for clients. In regards to customers that we won't take, and I know it's subjective, but it's my company, so it's my goal to determine that, is hate groups. So if something's hateful, or if I feel like it's bullying, like I really see myself as an advocate for the underdogs. So I hate government overreach, whether it's right wing, left wing government. We stood up for a lot of conservatives who were being bullied under Biden. And I also stand up for liberals who I feel like are being bullied under this administration, again, in a peaceful, respectful manner. I'm an old school liberal. Um, I support healthcare. I support public transit, but I don't support some of the wacky stuff like the gender ideology and defund the police and all that nonsense. I mean, so my I like to really support common sense, center right type policies in an ideal world that 80% of the people are behind. So my ideal customers, Jeffrey, are where it's an 80-20 issue, but the 20% is always getting their way because they show up to every event, right? And the 80% needs our help to have a more vocal presence, because essentially they represent the 80%, but the 20% always gets their way because they're so loud and they're one issue voters. And in many cases, they're just extremely aggressive. So we are often the voice of the silent majority on a lot of issues.
And it sounds to me, if I heard you correctly, but that's why I want to clarify that at least I understood what you say. It sounds to me like people come to you and they almost outsource the entire rally to you.
Correct.
Okay.
And sometimes they have us build the entire movement from the ground up. So in some cases, and it's actually very important because I'm a big believer in the right of anonymous free speech. So think about in the context of cancel culture. We had so many very wealthy conservatives come to us and say, we want you to build a movement for us. And the reason is that we would lose our jobs if we were knowingly behind these movements. We get kicked off board seats. We get kicked off management jobs because we're funding these things that are conservative priorities. So essentially, they're basically saying, here's a budget, run with it, and create a movement about whatever the issue is, whether it's local, state, federal, etc. So in some cases, people will say, build the movement. And in some cases, they'll say, we already have a movement. We just need bodies. I prefer to build movements than to simply provide bodies, but it's a business.
So when you're building a movement, that's sort of like a recurring relation. That's not a single event.
Absolutely not.
That's something where you're basically doing events, but it must be some sort of like consulting type of arrangement because you're doing more than just events.
Correct.
And and someone who wants a movement built, how do they define an objective with respect to coming up with a plan to actually build a movement and not doing a single event? I mean, like if I had come to you, this is in the UK, so this is just a hypothetical. Part of it is real, but BitChute used to be a UK company, and it's no longer a UK company. It's now a USA company. But the founders are UK nationals, and when myself and my friends who decided to help capitalize BitChute and we each got ownership positions in it. At actually their request, it was a mutual agreement, I would say, really, to relocate out of the UK. And one of the reasons was that there was that the bank account got shut down in the UK, and no bank would bank a BitChute. And then finally, it got to the point that not only the bank account shut down, the insurance policy, when the business insurance policy lapsed, the insurer refused to renew the insurance policy, even though every payment was made punctually, and even though there had never been any payouts on behalf of us. So we were apparently a very profitable client for the insurance policy. So apparently they didn't really care about, the profitability. So if I would have come to you and said, Adam, we got this problem, maybe we ought to get bodies in front of the banks or bodies in front of the insurance company and have a protest or something like that. Is that kind of how you would work with a client? Is that
Sure, but I would
here's
also,
my problem, and we want there to be visibility to the public, and maybe if there's
yes,
visibility to the public,
correct.
something.
Correct. What I always try to do in these movements is try to determine what is the root of your problem, right? Is it actually in your situation with BitChute, is the root the insurance company or the bank, or is it the root these laws that have been passed in Britain that restrict free speech and allow, I mean, as you said, you're a profitable client to the banks and to the insurance companies. They probably don't want to drop you. The reason they're dropping you is because of some pressure from the government to drop you because of their draconian anti-free speech laws. So what I would tell you is you could protest the bank and the insurance companies, but you're probably wasting your money because they have orders from up high to get you. So what I would say is find out what those laws are, or find out who in the government is instigating this and go after them and raise awareness of their attacks on free speech, right? And I 100% agree with you. I don't even know anything about your political views, but I do know that Britain has made unacceptable, unconscionable attacks on free speech. The most glaring of which are the idea that you can call something incitement, even if you're not mentioning an address, a person, anything. You're just saying, I'm really upset at the influx of immigration in the country. And I think there's a legitimate debate about immigration, and so I don't even agree 100% with that perspective. But the idea that you can't say that, and like if you say something like that, that you could get thrown in jail, and people have, is unacceptable. So the reason why those banks don't want to do business with you and the insurance didn't want to do business with you is because they're worried that they could face repercussions from the British government, right? So you mentioned how I analyze things for prospective customers. I always try to say, well, what's the root and who actually has the power to remedy your situation, right? So is it the bank CEO and the insurance CEO? Maybe, but I would argue in your situation, there's actually someone higher up who is driving it. And I would go after whoever's higher up and
Yeah,
protest
a lot.
them.
I agree that a lot of times somebody's higher up. The question is, can you ever really identify them?
Well,
So
you try. And the other
that's
thing,
the problem is, can you really
well, here's
ever
the other thing I would do, Jeffrey.
identify?
So
Excuse
here's
me?
the other thing I would do, just hypothetically, if we did that, is to say, okay, well, this insurance company, this bank, they have operations in the United States. Well, now we push the Trump administration in the United States to say, hey, if you're going to hurt companies and restrict free speech, then we're not going to let you work in our country, right? So you try to, what I always try to say is, what are the levers that might make a difference to influencing the people in power, right? So a lot of protest movements, Jeffrey, they waste their time because they're protesting somebody who has no power to remedy their situation, right? They go, like, I've seen people protest outside Los Angeles City Hall against the Trump administration, where I'm like, I don't think there's a single Trump supporter in the LA City Council. So why are you protesting them about Trump? This has nothing to do with one another, right? You're wasting your time. You have to find the levers that actually work. And my goal is to always give a really good return on investment to our customers. So if you're funding a movement, I want to be able to say, well, this is what you tangibly accomplished in regards to your movement.
Yeah, another issue we actually have. This is a very interesting conversation for me. Another issue, that we have, at BitChute is that uh, it seems like, and I don't really know all the details of how Wikipedia works, so I
Yeah.
must issue disclaimers in my statements. But Wikipedia has, in my opinion, an intentionally malicious description of BitChute.
Are they
And
called hate groups?
many people use Wikipedia as
Yeah.
like most reliable source,
Correct.
supposedly neutral source,
Yeah.
so that people refer to. As a matter of fact, we once had negotiations with a couple of people who would have been, big name influencers, who would have gotten involved in BitChute. And one of the things they made was a criteria was that we could figure out how to change the Wikipedia page, because they would have conversations with other people and say, "Hey, I'm working with BitChute. It's this really great free speech platform. They're really neutral.
Yeah.
They're really legitimate about their commitment to free speech. They don't have any sort of manipulative algorithms or anything. That we really are, a true free speech platform, and one that respects, people's privacy. We don't do any surveillance." So we're unique as far as the video streaming platforms. And the fact is, we have no manipulative algorithms,
Sure.
and we don't do any surveillance. We don't have any hate speech code. Illegal speech is one thing that the law stipulates as illegal speech, but if the law doesn't stipulate as illegal speech, who are we to be the arbiters of that? That's for the public.
Right. One man's hate is another man's idea. They called gay rights hateful. They called civil rights hateful all
Right.
at one time. So, they would have called MLK hateful at one point. So the reality is, I agree with the idea of not censoring, because at the end of the day, it's too subjective, and you'll end up, there's a reason why the ACLU, Jewish lawyers at the ACLU, defended the right of Nazis to protest horribly through a predominantly Jewish community in Skokie, Illinois, which was inhabited by Holocaust survivors, which was the most offensive form of free speech possible. But they basically said, if these horrible people can't do this horrible march, then there's no way that any other speech can be assured of being protected. So
I can tell you something, the irony of that, because when that occurred, I was a student at the University of Chicago.
were you really?
I was, yes. So I was very, very aware of that. As a matter of fact, that was one of my proudest moments as an American, is the fact that the ACLU, that was then run, the head of the ACLU then was a Jewish guy, and they had a Jewish lawyer,
Yeah.
stand up for, that's a real commitment to free speech.
Correct.
So even if I don't like it, it's what the founders desired, and what they intended free speech
Right.
to mean. But the irony of it is, I don't know if you know this, is that who provided friend of the court to the when it came to the hearings, is that Jesse Jackson and his Operation Push supported the cause of the Nazis marching in Skokie. And that's not my point, because that's okay. What was not okay was that the day of the march, they decided to expand their march into the black neighborhoods, and then Jesse Jackson, Operation Push, had a change of heart, and then they no longer supported. So it was okay that they could go into the Jewish neighborhood. It was not okay that they could go into the black neighborhoods. So
Right.
he really was not a supporter of free speech.
No.
He was a favor of the Nazis targeting people that he was okay with them targeting, but
just
when they were targeting his community, he didn't want them to have the same freedom of protest. So I find that humorous, but I also found that very, very proud. So going back to the Wikipedia example, okay?
Yeah.
So I understand, okay, and again, I'm not an expert at this, is that normally editors can go in and make changes to and add content to the Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
So right now, I think that from what I understand, is that the page is kind of locked. So it seems like somebody high up in Wikipedia, and who knows who that person is preventing people from moderating that content. And there's information that is outdated. There's information there that's wrong. So if I came to you and said, we got this Wikipedia problem, what would you propose?
Well, yeah, you'd have to protest the editors of Wikipedia and basically call them out for being anti-free speech. It helps to have it helps to have evidence for what you're saying, because I completely, by the way, agree with that, with everything you said, which is that there's a lot of people that Wikipedia determines are a hate group, and what that does is it syncs with Google, right? So the one thing that I would probably do, Jeffrey, is Google is a little easier to get at than Wikipedia, because Wikipedia has a very opaque management structure. Google isn't. But what happens, the reason why they're so concerned about Wikipedia is if you Google something, the first result is almost always Wikipedia, and it like populates the, so if I just Google BitChute, it'll say whatever. I mean, I haven't looked at it, but it'll be like BitChute is a far right, hate group, that has been called by the ADL the number one source of hate in America. I don't know, whatever the case may be, right? So what I would probably do is go after Google and say, Google, until Wikipedia stops these censorships, you should not display Wikipedia as the number one results, right? And then what I would do is go after, again, I would leverage the Trump administration, for whom Google is very much kind of kissing ass because of all their mergers and acquisitions and all that. I will go after the people who read the tech regulators within the Trump administration and say, tell Google, if they don't rein in Wikipedia, then you will stop kind of allowing their mergers to go through, right? So, and you'll stop essentially enabling their what they do, right? So I would, again, it's all about going to the levers of power and saying, hey, this is the way, this is how it's going to be. You have to find your leverage, right? So a lot of people, Jeffrey, would
What if somebody doesn't like? I'm a self-described anarcho-capitalist. So I don't like to appeal to power. I like to appeal to people, not to power. So
Well,
I don't want to use levers. I don't want to use levers of power. So I don't want to acknowledge, the fact that levers of power should be able to have the power that they use levers on. So I'm philosophically against that. So even though it might be effective, it's something that's against my principles. So I wouldn't want to ever do something that violates my principles. So I want to do it consistent with my principles. Excuse me?
Here's the challenge with that, Jeffrey.
Yes.
So let's just say we stage a protest outside the residences of the founders of Wikipedia, the head of Wikipedia, or the offices of Wikipedia. Wikipedia would probably just blow us off. They wouldn't care. So the reality is they just don't care, and it wouldn't make a difference. So the reality is Wikipedia needs Google. Google needs the Trump administration. So you have to lean on that like a domino effect to get them to do what they want, right? Otherwise, they just don't care, right? Like, I love to convince people, but people who are making a ton of money off a certain way of doing things will probably only be convinced if you pull on the levers that influence their money. Do you see what I'm saying?
I agree with you, but I think it's I mean, looking back again at the quotations of the founders felt that it's not people to be afraid of government, is that government
I agree.
to be afraid of the people.
That I agree with that. I 100% agree. And by the way, let me tell you why I also agree with the founders is the founders were big believers, though, of countervailing powers, right? So the brilliance of our system of government and why it survived is that it doesn't presume good intent, right? So many other systems have fallen because their constitutions assume good intent. Our constitutions assumes the president is a tyrant and will take as much power as he possibly can. Our constitution presumes that Congress is tyrannical and will take as much power as it possibly can, and that the courts are tyrannical and will take as much power as they possibly can. So that's why they stacked the government so that all these forces are essentially lined up against each other, and none of them can be too powerful. As Madison said, it's ambition counteracting ambition. So it's not presuming the president is a good guy. It's assuming the president is a bad guy. So why? I mean, my favorite senator actually is Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, former senator, because she stood up for the filibuster even when her party, the Democrats, were in power, because she said, look, if we just take everything that we want when we have the House, the Senate, the presidency, then what's to stop the other side from doing the exact same thing when they have it? So I'm actually one area where I agree with you. In my business, I totally believe in using whatever levers of power possible. But my belief is I I want the government to do as little as possible, and I want constantly divided government all the time. I want no one to be able to get anything done.
I think that one of Madison defined tyranny in many ways, and one of his definitions of tyranny was was one party controlling the courts, controlling Congress, and
Yes,
controlling one party controlling all three branches of government was considered
I
a
agree.
tyrannical form of government.
I agree with
So basically, when you see, I mean, this show is not really about politics, but
that. Sure.
basically, when you see today, the criticism that the Trump administration has made towards judges that don't rule his way, basically Trump wants everybody to align with him, and he thinks he has the popular mandate to do that. That's a complete misinterpretation of the Constitution, because
Correct.
the Constitution doesn't allow anyone to have a public mandate to do what they want. So that's that. The founders were very clear. They did not like democracy. They did not like the popular vote, and that the popular vote decides. They were very concerned about, tyranny, whether either from the minority or the majority. But
Yes.
any act of tyranny, they wanted to repress, suppress, and ultimately, when the famous quote from Ben Franklin, when he was asked, what form of government did they give us, and he said, "It's a republic if you can keep it." Who was responsible for keeping it? It wasn't the president. It wasn't Congress. It wasn't, the courts. It's the people. And how it should really work is, it really should be a very simple system. Everything starts out with the House. And why does it start out with the House? Is because the House is the one that's closest to the people. Okay,
Yep.
there are a number of congressional districts, and they're accountable to the people every 2 years. So everything starts from there, and then it goes to the Senate. So we have like a balance, because we didn't want mob rule, and so that was again the balance of the legislator and having the bicameral legislature, and and then you have the president, and there's and Federalist 69 deals specifically with limiting the power and prerogative of the president, and really how it should work is pretty simple. There's a constitution out there. When Congress feels the president is taking away power that has really been vested to Congress, and very little power was ever vested to the president at the beginning of the country, very little, almost nothing. Okay, and Thomas Jefferson basically said, let businesses handle commerce. Okay. Let all things related to the economy be handled by the local jurisdictions. And the president should stick to foreign affairs. And even that power was limited in foreign affairs, because basically, if I have a conversation with another government and I need to sign a treaty, anything I need to do with a foreign country, I had to go back to Congress for. If I'm not unhappy with a foreign country, all I could do was speak to foreign countries.
I like
But
that.
but after speaking to foreign countries, if I needed to take an action against them, if the tariffs, I had to go to Congress. Act of war, I had to go to Congress. Okay, a treaty, I have to go to Congress. So the consequence of every one of my conversations with foreign countries would require me that after that conversation, I'd have to go back to Congress. So clearly, all the power was with Congress, and Congress was closest to the people. And if Congress didn't do its job when the president decided to assert power beyond the scope as designed by the Constitution, then Congress is supposed to defend itself. And if Congress doesn't defend itself, the people are supposed to remove members of Congress who refuse to, who have, presidents who engage in acts of tyranny. And I'm not going to accuse Trump as the only president who's engaged in acts of tyranny. The fact is that they all have. Yes,
they all have.
It's not unique to
Trump. It's only
Trump.
been getting worse. I mean, and one act of tyranny builds on the next. I mean, the Patriot Act. I mean, the conservatives rightly bemoan the entrapment of many conservatives by the government, these little undercover operations where you take some guy with like a Forrest Gump like IQ and you kind of turn him into a criminal, and then you have some big press conference and say, oh, well, we just busted this big thing. Well, you started this big thing. And the Bush administration did it to Muslims. The Biden administration did it to conservatives, and now the Trump administration is doing it to college student activists, right? These same things, and one president's act of tyranny justifies the next president's act of tyranny. I mean, if you look at the president now, I mean, it is like a king. I mean, the president travels with an army, right? When the president travels, he travels with an army, like a king of yesteryear would have traveled with, 5,000 men on horseback, right? I mean, this is what it's like. I mean, the president has become this larger than life king with the power, the sole power to wipe out the entire human race if he so chooses. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's a lot of power in one man or hypothetically one woman in the future. And I can't stand how many idiots on both sides keep saying, oh, well, it's so frustrating, we can't get anything done. It's like, that's the damn idea, right? Like, I know so many liberal friends who hated Manchin and Sinema for not advancing Biden's aggressive Orwellian anti-inflation act, right? And I know so many conservatives who are like, why haven't they arrested all the Democrats yet for whatever? It's like, Jesus Christ, you're missing the fucking point. I mean, like, what if AOC is president in 4 years, right? And she decides to send everyone she doesn't like to Venezuela. I mean, like, you guys are all idiots. You're missing the point. Like, we have to have free speech for everybody. If we either have free speech for everybody, we either have minority rights for everybody. You can't know that your side will be protected if the side that you despise isn't protected.
That's really excellent words, Adam.
You're giving me my voice back. I'm coming off a long weekend in Las Vegas, so but I'm getting passionate just talking about it. It's giving me my voice back.
I love the passion. I'm a very passionate person myself, and I love your passion. I'm sorry because I took time away from you in the beginning, and so I'd like to do some things. One is I'd like you to. I always like to give my guests the last word, so I'd like you to say all the things and tell people how people can find you, how people can learn more about you, how people can get in touch with you, and I also. Again, since I messed up the early part of the podcast with my technical deficiencies, I'd also if you would like to have you back and we can expand this conversation.
Anytime.
So I'd love to have you back. So why don't you say all the things you would have liked to have said that I haven't given you the chance to say so far, and then we'll program another time where we could talk even further. And thank you so much, Adam.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, first of all, to be on your show. I'm quite a free speech absolutist, and I really respect, because you've really put literally your money where your mouth is in terms of free speech, and probably risked legal action against you from these kind of overzealous anti-free speech people. So I really respect what you've done. And again, I don't even know your politics, but I respect free speech because free speech transcends politics. About me, look me up at www.crowdsondemand.com, crowdsondemand.com. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Twitter, X, at CEO Adam Swart. That's CEO Adam SWART. If you want my thoughts on random things, mostly just ranting about free speech again. So if you want to follow me, do that. I think we actually talked about everything. I love the kind of discussion about the levers of power, free speech, protests, but let's do it again, because frankly, there's so much to talk about in this era, where you're seeing a lot of protest. And my big ask of your audience is, like what I said, if you support free speech, that should be more important than supporting your political side. And whether you're conservative or liberal, it's better to get 30% of what you want and make sure that the other side only gets 30% of what they want, rather than getting 70% of what you want and letting the other side get 70% of what you want. It's much better to, for, as one of these guys said, a government that governs best is a government that governs least
Correct.
but effectively, that does what they do effectively but does as little as possible, right? And a great example of that is some of the Baltic states, which were actually designed by conservative American economists, like Estonia. They have a flat tax, low taxes, low government, but what the government does, it does effectively.
That's great words, Adam. And so after this will go online, I'll have Kristen contact you so we can
Please.
coordinate another opportunity to do this. I really enjoyed meeting you very, very much, and I would like to speak more with you, and I would like to have the people watching this hear more from you. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It was a pleasure to be on your program, and enjoy Mexico.
Thank you so much. Take care, Adam.
Thanks.
Bye.